My name is Elena, I'm 41 years old, and the afternoon I found out my husband had a second family. I was sitting at the kitchen table of the house we had built together, drinking the coffee I made every morning at 6:45, in the mug he had brought me from a business trip to Seattle that I now understood had not been a business trip to Seattle. I didn't cry, I didn't call anyone, I didn't move from that chair for a long time. I just sat there with the mug in my hands and thought about something Marcus had told me 11 years earlier, on our third date, leaning across a restaurant table with the particular confidence of a man who believed his own intelligence was his most attractive quality. He had said, "Elena, money never lies, people lie, but money always tells the truth if you know how to read it." He had spent the next decade teaching me how to read it. He had no idea what he was building. If you have ever trusted someone completely and discovered that the life you thought you were living was only half the picture, stay with me, subscribe to Unspoken Truth, because this story is about what happens when the person who taught you everything forgets that you were paying attention. I met Marcus Reeves when I was 29 years old at a professional development conference in Chicago. I was 3 years into my career as a forensic accountant at a mid-size firm. He was 34 and had just launched his second company, a logistics consultancy that was growing faster than he had projected and required, as he put it that night over dinner, someone who understood numbers the way a surgeon understood a body, not just the surface but the systems underneath. He was charming in the specific way of men who are used to being the most capable person in any given room, and the thing was, he often was, Marcus was genuinely brilliant at building things, at seeing opportunity where other people saw complication, at assembling the right people around the right idea at the right moment. I admired that about him without reservation for a very long time. We dated for 2 years and married in a small ceremony in Savannah, Georgia, where my mother's family was from, live oaks and Spanish moss and my grandmother's ring on my finger, 38 people and a dinner that went until midnight. I remember standing outside at the end of the night with Marcus's hand in mine looking up at the sky thinking, I built the right thing with the right person. I was 31 years old and I meant it with my whole heart. The first years of our marriage were good in the way that first years can be when two people are genuinely well-matched and genuinely busy. Marcus's company grew and I made partner at my firm at 34, 2 years ahead of the typical track. We bought a house in Brookhaven, a neighborhood in Atlanta with wide streets and old trees and neighbors who waved from their driveways. We talked about children and agreed to wait a little longer. We traveled when we could. We had a life that looked from the outside exactly like what it was supposed to look like and felt from the inside, for a long time, exactly the same. Marcus traveled for work regularly, 2 or 3 times a month, sometimes more. The nature of the business required it and I understood that. I traveled too, less frequently but enough that we had developed a comfortable architecture around our time apart, check-in calls in the evening, a standing dinner reservation on whatever Friday he came home, a habit of bringing each other small things from wherever we'd been, a book, a coffee, something specific to the place that said I was there and I thought of you. The Seattle mug was blue with white letters and sat on the second shelf of our cabinet and I had used it every morning for 2 years without once questioning the trip that produced it. That is the particular cruelty of a well-maintained lie. It doesn't announce itself, it just sits on your shelf looking like everything else. The discovery did not happen the way these things happen in movies. There was no lipstick on a collar, no strange perfume, no late-night phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. It happened the way things happen in my actual profession, through a number that didn't belong. I was doing our personal taxes in February, something I had always handled myself because it was faster and because Marcus trusted me completely with our finances, which was one of the many ironies I would spend considerable time with later, and I was reconciling our investment accounts when I found a transfer I didn't recognize, $3,400 to an account number I didn't have on file. Dated 14 months earlier, I almost moved past it. It was small relative to our overall picture and the description field said consulting fees, which was a category we used regularly for Marcus's business expenses. But I was a forensic accountant, finding the thing that almost looks right was literally my profession, and something about the account number format was slightly off from the ones I was used to seeing in our files, not wrong exactly, just different enough to create a small friction in the back of my mind that I had learned over 15 years of work to never ignore. I pulled the full transaction history. It took me 20 minutes. and what I found was not one transfer but 27, spread across 14 months, varying amounts, always described as consulting fees, always to the same account, totaling $94,000. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and my coffee and the blue Seattle mug, and I looked at those numbers for a long time. Then I opened a new document and I started working. I want to tell you about what it feels like to apply your professional skills to your personal life in a moment like that one, because it is not what you might expect. It was not cold exactly, it was not numb, it was something more like the feeling of operating in a very high-stakes situation where the cost of a mistake is total. The same feeling I got in the early years of my career when I was sitting across from a CFO who had been cooking books for 7 years and I had the documentation in front of me and I had to be completely certain before I said a single word, because certainty was the only thing that mattered. I worked for 6 hours that first night. I pulled every account, every statement, every transfer going back 4 years. I built a timeline in a spreadsheet with the same structure I used at work: date, amount, account, description, cross-reference, and I let the picture form the way pictures form when you stop looking for what you expect and start looking at what is actually there. What was actually there was a second financial life, parallel and carefully maintained, a separate account that received regular transfers from 3 different sources, 2 of which were subsidiaries of Marcus's company that I had never been involved in, a lease payment that corresponded to an address in Decatur, 12 miles from our house in Brookhaven, recurring charges at a pediatrician's office, a school in Decatur that I looked up and found was a private elementary, charges at a grocery store 4 blocks from the Decatur address, charges at a children's clothing store, charges at a toy store in November and December that followed a pattern I recognized because I had seen it in our own accounts, the particular spending shape of a parent buying Christmas presents for small children. I sat back in my chair and looked at the ceiling for a long time. 2 children, I estimated from the pediatric and school charges, ages roughly 4 and 7 based on the school and the clothing sizes implied by the amounts, which meant Marcus had started this before our 4th wedding anniversary. I thought about the 3rd date, the restaurant table, his voice leaning toward me. Money never lies, people lie, but money always tells the truth if you know how to read it. I closed the laptop and went to bed. I lay next to my husband in the dark and I listened to him breathe and I thought, you have no idea what just happened. I slept, which surprised me, deeply and without dreams. I called my friend Priya the next morning from my car in the parking garage at work. Priya was a family law attorney in Atlanta. We had been friends since law school orientation, where we had both shown up 40 minutes early and spent the time before anyone else arrived talking about the specific anxiety of being early to things and the people who were always inexplicably late. She had been one of the 8 people at our wedding in Savannah. I told her what I had found. I sent her the spreadsheet while we were on the phone. I heard her breathing change as she scrolled through it. Elena. I know. How are you? I thought about it genuinely, sitting in my car in the parking garage with the engine running and the heat on because it was February and Atlanta was doing its unpredictable February thing, cold in a way that felt personal. I'm clear, I said. I'm not fine, but I'm clear, and right now clear is what I need to be. Okay, she said, and I heard in that single word everything a good friend contains: the grief she was holding for me, the fury she was managing on my behalf, the professional focus she was already bringing to the situation because she knew that was what I needed. Then let's talk about what clear looks like from here. We talked for an hour. I was 20 minutes late to my first meeting and didn't care. Priya walked me through every step, what to preserve, what not to touch, what to document further, what my position looked like legally given our asset structure and the length of the marriage and the nature of what I had found. She was thorough and specific, and at the end she said, "You have more leverage than you probably realize right now." I know, I said, I just need a little more time. How much time? Enough to be certain of everything. I'm not doing this until I can walk into a room and have the complete picture, every number, every account, every address. I need the whole thing. A pause. That's very you. Yes, I said, it is. I spent the next 6 weeks finishing what I had started at the kitchen table. I worked methodically and without urgency, the way I worked on every complex case, because urgency creates errors and I could not afford errors. I hired a forensic investigator named Thomas who came recommended by Priya and who had the particular low-key competence of someone who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. I gave him what I had and asked him to fill in the gaps. Thomas filled in the gaps. Her name was Serena, she was 32 years old, she had met Marcus at a conference in Charlotte 6 years ago, she worked in marketing, she had 2 daughters, ages 5 and 8, named Lily and Grace, she lived in the house on the Decatur address in a 3-bedroom with a backyard that Thomas had photographed from the street, a swing set visible over the fence, a minivan in the driveway with a school parking permit in the window. I looked at the photographs for a long time. I didn't feel what I expected to feel about Serena, I didn't feel rage, I felt something closer to sorrow, a woman who may or may not have known the full truth of what she was in, 2 small girls on a swing set who knew nothing at all, none of this was their fault, none of this was something I was going to direct anything toward. What I felt toward Serena and her daughters was a complicated tenderness that I didn't fully understand and didn't try to, I just let it be what it was. What I felt toward Marcus was different, and I let that be what it was too. I told Marcus on a Saturday morning in April, I chose Saturday deliberately, I had chosen everything deliberately, I had moved a portion of my personal assets the week before on Priya's advice, I had retained Priya formally as my attorney, I had made copies of every document in 3 separate locations. I had done everything I needed to do before I sat across from my husband at the kitchen table and let him understand what was about to happen. He came downstairs at 8:30 the way he always did on Saturdays, unhurried, comfortable, the ease of a man in his own home who believes his secrets are intact. He was wearing the gray sweater I had given him for his birthday 2 years ago and he smelled like the soap we kept in our shower and he looked like my husband and the life we had built together and I held all of that and the spreadsheet open on the table at the same time and I waited until he had poured his coffee and sat down. "I need you to look at something." He looked at my face first, then at the laptop, then back at my face, and I watched the particular sequence of a person understanding that something has changed permanently. It moved through him like weather, there and gone and leaving everything different. He looked at the spreadsheet. The silence lasted a long time. "Elena." "I don't need you to explain it," I said, "I need you to understand that I have the complete picture, every account, every transfer, the address in Decatur, Thomas's full report, everything documented and copied and held by my attorney. I'm not here for a conversation about what happened, I'm here to tell you what happens next." His face had gone to a place I had never seen on it before, past the charm and the confidence and the particular self-assurance of a man who had always believed he was the most capable person in the room, down to something underneath all of that which was smaller and older and afraid. "What happens next?" he said, and it wasn't quite a question. "Priya will be in touch Monday morning, I've retained her formally, the asset documentation is complete, my position is strong, and I want this handled quickly and quietly because neither of us benefits from the alternative." I stood up, I picked up the Seattle mug, I walked to the sink and I washed it carefully and set it on the drying rack. "You told me once that money never lies," I said, with my back to him, "you were right about that." I picked up my bag and my keys and I walked out of my own kitchen and drove to Priya's house where she had coffee waiting and we sat at her table for 4 hours going through everything, and at some point in the middle of all of it I started crying, not the kind of crying that asks for anything, just the kind that happens when something you built over a decade finally comes down and the body needs to acknowledge the weight of what it carried. Priya sat with me and didn't try to fix it, which was exactly right. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. It was not easy and it was not clean but it was complete. I kept the house because I wanted to and because my position made it possible. I kept my retirement accounts and a settlement that reflected 14 years of marriage and the particular financial structure of what Marcus had been doing with company assets that legally intersected with our marital estate in ways that Thomas and Priya had documented with the kind of thoroughness that tends to accelerate negotiations considerably. Marcus moved out in May, he is co-parenting Lily and Grace with Serena now. That situation is not mine to comment on and I don't. I hope those girls are okay because they are children and none of this is their doing. I repainted the kitchen in June, a warm white that changed the light in the room entirely. I replaced the cabinet shelf where the Seattle mug had lived with a longer one that held more. I bought 4 new mugs from a ceramics studio in Inman Park, handmade, different sizes, each one chosen because I liked the weight of it in my hands. I made partner at the firm that fall, 2 years ahead of their projection for me, the promotion that had been building for years and that I had been too careful about my personal stability to fully pursue. I accepted it in a conference room on a Thursday afternoon and drove home through the Atlanta traffic with the windows down and the radio on, something I wouldn't normally have chosen, and I felt, underneath the exhaustion and the grief and the complicated residue of everything the year had contained, genuinely and completely myself. 6 months after the divorce was final, I had dinner with Priya and her husband David, a restaurant we liked in Virginia Highland, good wine and the kind of evening that doesn't have an agenda, and at some point David asked me how I was really doing, the way people ask when they want the true answer and not the social one, and I thought about it for a moment with the wine in my hand and the restaurant warm around us. "I'm good," I said, "I'm genuinely good. I'm not the same as I was and I don't think I want to be, but I'm good." Priya raised her glass to knowing how to read the numbers. I raised mine to the people who taught us everything they knew. If you are somewhere right now holding a number that doesn't belong, a detail that created a small friction you keep almost moving past, I want you to trust that friction. Your instincts are data. The thing that feels slightly off is worth looking at directly, even when you're afraid of what you might find, especially then, because the truth that you find yourself is always less destructive than the truth that finds you. You are allowed to be both devastated and clear at the same time. Those things are not opposites. You are allowed to grieve what you lost and protect what you have simultaneously. You are allowed to use every skill you possess in service of your own survival without apology. The most powerful thing I did was not the spreadsheet, it was not the Saturday morning conversation, it was not the settlement, it was the 6 weeks between finding the first number and saying a single word to anyone, 6 weeks of being completely certain, of building something so thorough and so accurate that when the moment came there was nothing left to dispute, nothing left to rewrite, nothing left to do but move forward. Certainty is its own form of power, and no one can take it from you once you have it. My name is Elena, I'm 41 years old, and every mug in my kitchen is one I chose myself, each one is exactly the right weight, and every morning when I make my coffee I know exactly where everything in that house came from. All of it mine, every single piece. Thank you for listening, take care of yourself, and trust the number that doesn't belong.